So, welcome to our Side Bar Café webinar for November. My name is Cindy Lopez. I am the founder of LEAP, Legal Education Access Pipeline. And this is...
Hi, I'm Tiffany Tao. I am an advisory board member of LEAP and the pro bono manager at the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles.
And I, previous to this life, was in the Attorney General's office for many years for my career. And yes, I did work for now Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. I have met her several times and she's amazing. And I had a feeling she was going to be in the White House, just not this soon. So it's very, very exciting. Mm-hmm. So if you can put in the chat and make sure that you put to all, not just the panelists, but to the panelists and attendees, just let us know who you are. You know, are you an attorney? Are you a law student? Are you a potential law student? Definitely the LEAP fellows. Let me know who's here. So
cannot choose attendees.
Okay. Oh, okay. I think it says now all panelists and attendees, right?
Yeah. Let me try this. Did that work? Uh-oh, no, not quite. Let's try this.
It is. Now it's working.
Fantastic.
Right? Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
I love technology.
It's the time to learn, Cindy. We're learning as we go.
Oh my gosh, we have someone from Queens. I love it. That's awesome.
Oh, thank you for joining.
Thank you for joining. I know it's kind of late, but oh good. So now everybody can see. Yay. All right. So we are going to start. Like I said, I'm super excited about having these three amazing women. So I'm going to introduce first Dean Richardson. Dean Richardson is the Dean and Chancellor's Professor of Law at University of California, Irvine School of Law, with joint appointments in the Department of Criminology, Law and Society, and Department of Asian American Studies. Dean Richardson received her BA from Harvard and JD from Yale. She is the second Dean of UCI Law, and at the time of her appointment, she was the only woman of color to lead a top 30 school, which is amazing. Mm-hmm. Under her leadership, UCI Law broke records and achieved unprecedented success, including becoming the only law school less than 10 years old to achieve rank of number 21 by US News and World Report, our favorite rankings. Yeah. She has won numerous awards and recognition, including the American Association of Law Schools Derek Bell Award, which recognizes a faculty member's extraordinary contributions to legal education through mentoring, teaching, and scholarship. She was named one of the top women lawyers in California by the Daily Journal and chosen as one of the 2 most influential Korean Americans in Orange County. So welcome, Dean Richardson. Next, we have Dean Onwachi Willig.
Myself.
I was going to tell you to do that.
Yeah. For the discussion.
Right. So next we have Dean Onwachi Willig, who is Dean and Professor of Law at Boston University School of Law. She is a renowned legal scholar and expert in critical race theory, employment discrimination, and family law. And she joined the law school as dean in August 2018. She earned her college degree from Grinnell. I would love to know how you ended up at Grinnell. And law degree from University of Michigan. While at law school, she was a founding editor of the Michigan Journal of Race and Law. Before joining the law school, Dean Onwachi Willig served as Chancellor's Professor of Law at the University of California, Berkeley School of Law, and previously taught at the University of Iowa College of Law. She is also the recipient of numerous awards. By the way, I just need to do a quick sidebar here. These bios I'm cutting down. So we would literally take an hour and 15 minutes to read these bios. So suffice it to say that she also has a gazillion awards, and most recently was nominated as an Extraordinary Woman in Boston 2019. Welcome, Dean Onwachi Willig. Oh, make sure you unmute yourself also. And last but not least is Dean Mutcherson, who is co-dean and an award-winning professor of law at Rutgers. She received her BA in history from the University of Pennsylvania and her JD from Columbia, where she was a Stone Scholar. I don't know if you've noticed the amazing colleges and law schools that these three women went to. Dean Mutcherson teaches family law, torts, South African constitutional law, and this one I want to hear about: bioethics, babies, and baby making. Baby making. I could say so many things about that. I just don't, that would be so not appropriate. Prior to joining the faculty at Rutgers in 2002, Professor Mutcherson was an acting assistant professor of lawyering at the New York University School of Law. She was a consulting attorney at the Center for Reproductive Law and Policy and a staff attorney at the HIV Law Project. So welcome, Dean Mutcherson.
Thank you so much for having us, Cindy. This is wonderful.
Of course. So again, those bios were very much cut. They're so much longer. So what we're going to do is we're going to do kind of I want this to be a conversation with us. And when I mean us here. Sorry, attendees. And but definitely, if someone says something that you have a burning question, definitely put it in the Q&A.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll start with Dean Richardson, and just first of all, for all three of you, if you could let us know, was your goal to be the dean of a law school? Was that ever a goal of yours?
Absolutely not.
Yeah. I would imagine it's really not a goal for a lot of people, but I wanted to get that out of the way. So Dean Richardson, can you just tell the audience a little bit of your journey and how being a woman of color has shaped that journey?
Sure. Welcome, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. And I love being here with two colleagues and friends, Kimberly and Angela. We know each other. We like each other. It's great to be here. So I'm Black and Korean. I mentioned that because when Cindy was introducing me, she mentioned the Korean part. So I just wanted to add that part. Grew up on military bases and spent my entire life not thinking that I could do any of the things that I ended up doing in my life. I always felt like the imposter. I always felt like everyone had made a mistake. I always felt like this is not where I should be. And law school, becoming a law professor and then becoming a dean weren't things that were planned. And I want to say all of that to you because I think so often people like us, I didn't have lawyers in my family. My mom worked the night shift in a rope factory the entire time and cleaned houses when I was growing up so that I could have the educational opportunities that I had. And so everything that I've done has also been shaped by my racial background and my gender identity. And I'm happy to talk more about that, but it is something that is always on my mind. No matter what job I do, no matter what situation I'm in, I am always aware of my race, of my gender, always aware of how other people might view me, how other people might underestimate me. And so this is a common feeling if any of you are feeling that. And what I also want to tell you is even if you are feeling that, you can accomplish anything that you want to accomplish. So I'll end this by saying, say yes to opportunities that are presented to you, even if you think that this is something that you can't do. This is what I've done my entire life, and I want you to do that too. So thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. All right, Dean Mutcherson, same question.
I was just writing down the last thing that song said so I could inspire myself at various points in life. So I definitely did not grow up interested in being a legal academic or interested in being a law school dean. I grew up right outside of Washington, D.C. in Silver Spring, Maryland. And I grew up in a time when DC was still very much a chocolate city. And my parents had moved there when my dad went to medical school at Howard. So I grew up surrounded by folks who were sort of the first in their families to take a significant leap, right? Because we knew a bunch of people who were Black doctors in DC. I never went to a white doctor until I was an adult, because every doctor I went to was a doctor from Howard, most of whom had gone to school with my father. And my mom was a nurse at Howard University Hospital, and then later on, she became a nursing instructor at a vocational high school in DC. So I was really lucky in that I grew up in a town and in a time when I was surrounded by a really vibrant city that was mostly Black people, and a city that had an HBCU. And so I just had these amazing role models throughout my childhood, just folks who had, again, many of whom were the people who sort of were the leapfrogs, right, of their families. So, they went from families that had really struggled into medical school and then really sort of changed the trajectory of their family. So I definitely felt sort of the weight of that as I was growing up. And I went to a number of different schools, most of them actually in DC. And there's a lot of privilege in DC, right? Even along with it being a chocolate city, there's lots of people with money, and they're politicians or they're diplomats or all these other sorts of things. So I got that sort of contrast. So I grew up as somebody who wanted to be a lawyer. I was about 10 years old when I decided that I wanted to be a lawyer. Went straight from college into law school. So if you're one of those people who's thinking about doing that, it's definitely doable. I actually don't recommend it, but certainly it's doable. And then I wanted to be, I wanted to be a public interest lawyer. I wanted to be a civil rights lawyer. I saw somebody in the chat say that she wants to be a civil rights lawyer. And so that's why I went to law school, and I graduated. I became a public interest lawyer, did that work for a few years. And then everything that has happened post law school has been sort of a series of accidents and a series of saying yes to things for which I did not think I was qualified. Right. I'm going to tell you what my little motivational thing is. And I got this from an ex who used to say this when I would be like, oh, I shouldn't apply for that, or I can't do that, or whatever. And at one point she said to me, you know what you need to do when you're feeling like that? You need to put on your white man hat and think about whether you would be saying that to yourself if you were just like a run-of-the-mill white dude. And about 100% of the time, the answer is no, right? If I were a run-of-the-mill white dude, I'd be like, I'll just apply, who cares, right? Like, I'm smart enough, I'm this enough, or whatever. And it's actually a really powerful tool to do that. So I ended up being an academic, which I did not expect to do. And then I ended up being a dean because the person who was the dean at my law school basically got a job elsewhere. And the chancellor of my campus was like, well, if you're going to leave at the end of the year, you might as well leave now. And she came to me in November and said, this guy's leaving. I want you to step in. And I was like, this is madness. And then I said yes, right? Because I don't know, I'm a good institutional citizen. And so I stepped into the role. And so that was in January 2019. And when I became the dean at my law school, I was the first woman, the first Black person, and the first queer person to be the dean there. And so there's something that's incredibly hyper visible when you're a first in that way. And I think that's a feeling that all of us have had at various points and probably will at later points in our lives as well. But it's also incredibly powerful. So, I'm grateful. At this moment, I would say I'm grateful to be where I am now. There are certainly times when I think to myself, wow, you could have made better choices for yourself. But I feel good about what I'm doing now. And also that I get to do it with women like Angela and Song and the number of other Black women and women of color who are law school deans right now. It would not be the same if I didn't have all those people to talk to and to get support from.
That is awesome. I love it. All right, Dean Onwuachi Willig.
Yeah, so I definitely would say too that I didn't plan to be a dean. I didn't know what a dean was, to be honest. And even when I was a law professor, I have to say for a good time, I didn't know necessarily what a dean did for a long time. But I would say that one thing that I think people should do, and sometimes it's just repeating, but it's is just really staying open to opportunities. I grew up in Houston, Texas. I didn't know any lawyers. I didn't grow up in lawyers. I grew up around apartments, in Houston, Texas. But I had a high school teacher who saw something in me and another student. We were the only, we went to a really diverse high school, incredibly racially diverse, economically diverse high school, public high school. But we, it was tracked. And so there were very few students of color in the IB or honors classes. And so we were the 2 Black students in this class. I was African-American teacher, and she's like, there's an attorney in my church. And she asked him to hire us over the summer. And so he hired us. He did municipal finance. He was like the first Black associate at one of the major law firms in Texas. And himself, he was a trailblazing attorney in Texas. And so he hired us over the summer. And I left that summer and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be a lawyer at all. But I was really grateful for the experience. And I went to college even thinking that I didn't want to be a lawyer either. But that was really critical, because when I finally decided in college later, after taking some courses related to civil rights, that I wanted to be a lawyer, I knew that I could, because I'd had that experience, because I'd met him, right? And so my life has been a series of people saying, oh, I think you should consider this, right? And that's how I became a law professor. Professor said, oh, I think you should apply for this grant with me. It's a grant for people who, to try to encourage people to become college faculty. And so let's do research over the summer and do that. And that's how I did that. But I decided I was going to go to law school. And somebody said, well, you should think about being a law professor, because you like doing scholarship, you think about being a law professor. And so I said, one thing I would say is that sometimes, even when you don't fully believe in yourself, or you don't know enough to believe in yourself, believe other people when they see something in you, right? And follow that, right? And so, and just, take advantage of those opportunities and keep continuing to learn. When people say, oh, you should think about this, the same thing with deaning. It was many, many years after somebody first said to me, you should think about deaning, before I ever applied for a deanship. But it stayed in the back of my mind because somebody said it to me, right? And so I think that, when people point things out to you, is that just like, keep it in the back of your mind. Don't just sort of like, say, oh gosh, so that can't be it. Fight the imposter syndrome, as a number, as Professor Dean Richardson and Dean Mutcherson have both said. The other thing I would say that being a woman of color has really shaped my journey in all the same ways, right? It shapes everything. I think it shapes everything I'm thinking about it at every moment. You're always walking into a room when you don't know people, having to reprove yourself, right? We don't get the presumption of competence, a presumption of being, any of those things. You're always having to reprove yourself. But one thing that I would say that it took me until I was, older, kind of older adult, to figure out, is that all the strength and all the advantage that comes from the viewpoints, the perspectives, the insights that I have gained as a result of my experiences as a woman of color, right? That just people around me don't have. They don't have those insights. They aren't bringing that to the room. They can't see things that I see because of it. And so, and I think that it took me a while to realize, oh, wow, because they were so obvious to me, I didn't realize that they weren't obvious to other people. And it's a real strength. And so I think that the sooner that people realize that, the better too.
I'm so glad you said that, because we have a lot of LEAP fellows, although I'm laughing that you guys are putting in their former LEAP fellow. It just ended like a month ago. So I guess they're now former. Oh my God.
Graduates.
Right. And then we have a lot of students who are potential law students. And I know that for a lot of first gen immigrant students and students of color, they don't understand that our stories are unique and amazing and strong, and other people don't have those stories. So to be proud of them. So I'm really glad you said that. I also think it's very interesting that you said when you walk into a room, you don't get the presumption of confidence, which is very interesting. Did I write that down right? I can't read my writing, but I think that's what you said.
Interesting and powerful.
Yeah, because if you're always having to, gosh, prove and reprove yourself, I think that gets just exhausting. So, all right, Tiffany, let's go on to our next subject.
Yes. So we wanted to ask all of our deans today a question about some of the challenges of creating a more diverse student body in law school. And, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges to diversifying the law school student body? And if you can think of efforts or examples on your campuses to help address some of those challenges, I feel like it would be so interesting to dive into that a little bit. So, Dean Onwuachi-Willig, do you mind going first
Sure.
for this one?
I mean, I think one of the challenges it used to be, I mean, of course, access to studying for the LSAT, right? There were the Kaplan courses, the Princeton Review courses, which were a couple of $1,000s, and certainly whether you had money to spend on those courses. And I think programs like these make a big difference because they provide access to it. The Khan Academy now has worked with the Law School Admissions Council to provide a free LSAT preparation course. And we've seen, improvements in the scores of students of color, right, since that has been happening. So now that there's free access to these, so I think that people should really, if you practice the LSAT, it's not an exam that you want to take cold. Take advantage of the Khan Academy course, practice it. It's a good course. It helps to prepare you. And I think, that's an important thing. So, I mean, the over reliance on the LSAT by some schools, I think, is another potential, is another barrier as well. And then I would say, wealth disparities, right? Wealth disparities that are often overlapping with race, right? So we know from research that, law school student bodies tend to be, if we're using education of parents as a proxy for advantage, they're actually the most privileged, right, of all graduate student bodies, right, if you use that, right, more so than dental school and medical school, right. So those are some barriers there, and they're serious barriers because it is an expensive, it is costly to go to law school, and it is time consuming to study for the LSAT, particularly when you're doing, often students of color are not only, doing all the things that all of their students are doing, they're also doing additional work to make their schools more inclusive and better. Many people are working on campus jobs and working jobs off campus, and then many people are also dealing with the emotional burdens if they're on predominantly white campuses as well, that also take additional time. And so it is a lot to grapple with, right? And then also have to study for something like the LSAT, which is really, it turns out to be, very important test in admissions. So I guess, a couple of things I would say that help with those things is, study as much as you can and do as well as you can on that. Your essay is really important. So your personal essay, the story you tell about why you want to be a lawyer, what you can contribute to that school community, and what you can contribute to the legal profession is really important, because schools ultimately want to admit people who want to contribute to society, who will contribute to the institution, and who will make a name for the institution, right? And so as you can demonstrate that in your essay, you can demonstrate something that's really authentic and that tells them something about you and what you bring. That's really important. And I would choose recommenders who know you, right? Don't choose somebody just because you think that the name is going to help you. You want to choose somebody who knows you, right? The other thing that you can do is you can help your recommenders, right? So when you give them your information, say, here's a story you could tell about me, whatever you want to say, right? So I always like to ask people when they ask me to write a letter, I say, I want to sit down and talk to them, first of all, because I want to know a little bit more, but like, what's your story? What is, if I were going to tell you who you are, what would it be? To help with cost, and this is kind of a game, and I don't know, I'd love to hear what the other deans think about it. So the cost thing is tricky, and I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying what they think. The costing is tricky, but I think that a lot of ways that law schools make decisions for merit-based aid, and a lot of aid is now merit-based, but places have need-based aid. Number one, if a place has need-based aid and you can qualify for it, you should apply for it. So we have need-based aid, and a lot of students still don't apply for it, even when we think that they would qualify for it. You should apply for need-based aid. if you would qualify for it. Okay. But for merit-based aid, a lot of schools are looking at a couple of things based on it. They're looking at GPA and they're looking at LSAT score. If you're not above one of those scores, it doesn't mean that you won't get in. So you should still apply. Please, 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 please apply. But what I'm saying is that, so you could be kind of strategic in terms of how you apply in terms of your safety schools, applying to safety schools that where you know your score, either your GPA or your LSAT scores above that. That school might give you a scholarship that then if you get into another school that's your dream school, you can use that scholarship as a way of asking for more money at your dream school. You see what I'm saying? So I think that's one way to sort of play that kind of, that kind of scholarship game. And to do it is apply early when there's still lots of money, because if you're applying late, and this is one thing that students of color often apply later, and I realize there are all kinds of really, really complicated factors because it's expensive and, there are lots of things that affect things, right? But apply early when there are more spots in the class and when there's more money. It's really important to do. And you can get a fee waiver you can get a waiver for the LSAT from the Law School Admissions Council. You can apply for a waiver from Law School Admissions Council. You could also often apply for a waiver from law schools, right? So, think about all those things. If it's cost, look into and ask the school if they'll give you a waiver of those fees.
Wow, Dean, on what you will, I feel like I want to ask our audience, did you take notes? Are you writing this down? Because this is amazing. I wish I asked this, years ago, wait, let me make sure I got it all. Thank you so much for that advice.
Sorry, Tiffany. I just want to emphasize something that the dean said at the very end. And this is especially for our LEAP fellows and our future LEAP fellows. You said apply earlier, right?
Yeah.
Because the cohort of the class has not been formed yet, and financial aid might be a little bit easier. I want the students to hear this so that when they're wondering why I want them to apply by Thanksgiving, which is next week, and we have some students who have applied, and I know they're waiting for their LSAT score, but you're making my night right now because I feel like sometimes people don't want to hear that they should apply early because there's rolling admissions, right? And you can apply in February, but I don't think that's a good idea. So I'm so glad you said that. So sorry, Tiffany, go ahead.
No, not at all. Thank you, Dean Onwuachi-Willig. So next, maybe Dean Metruson, do you mind talking a little bit about what do you think some of the biggest challenges to diversifying the law school student body are, and maybe any efforts that you're already making on campus to help overcome and address them?
Sure. I think the sort of overarching issue for law schools is the combination is really sort of stems from US News and World Report and their ranking system, right? Law schools are really negatively driven by US News and World Report, which is really, really frustrating for us. And so there's this incredible numbers game that gets played when we're doing admissions and, who have we admitted, who said yes, at what point. And there are some schools, frankly, that play that game in a more strategic way than other schools do. And then there are other schools that I think are really, really want to build a class that looks a particular way, right? You care about diversity, you care about having first-gen students and giving people opportunity. You care about keeping costs low to the extent that you can. So, there's something to be said for not just choosing a school based on ranking. And of course, that's totally self-serving for me to say that because I'm at the lowest ranked school of the three of us. So I also have the cheapest tuition. Put that out there.
Right on.
But know the institution, right? I mean, don't just sort of say, oh, it looks, the shiny brochures and all of that good stuff is nice, but, talk to students who are already there, get a sense of what their experience has been. Do they have access to their professors? Do they like their classes? Do they get the academic support that they need? Really ask that wide range of questions. So the US News thing is really, really tough. Our profession is one of the least diverse professions out there, which is completely unacceptable and completely shocking. And so everything that we can do to bring folks into our law schools, to help them be successful when they come to our law schools, to graduate, to take the bar, and then to practice law. So MSP is one thing that we do. We also have a social justice scholars program, which I'm really excited about. And when I went to law school to be a public interest lawyer. And the community was pretty small, right? Everybody comes in their first year and it's like, I'm gonna go save the world. I'm gonna be a public interest lawyer. And then they realize how much money they can make, and they realize how big their loans are. And they decide that's not the work that they're gonna do. So, one of the other things that I found really important for me as a law student was finding that community of social justice oriented people. And so that's one of the other nice things about our institution, that we create this space for people who don't just say it in their first year, but are really focused on that throughout their law school career, because it can be a really different path, right? So I remember, coming back after my first year of law school, and the vast majority of my classmates were doing on-campus interviewing and getting their, fancy law firm jobs for the next summer. And all of us who were public interest were like, well, I guess we'll wait around until January and then we'll look for jobs. So it's a really, really different experience. And then sort of the last thing, I wanted to just piggyback on a couple of things that Angela said about the application process. So one thing I'll say about applying early is that sometimes what happens when you apply early, and if your metrics aren't quite where the school wants them to be, they're going to hold on to your application, right? They're either going to hold on to your application or they're going to waitlist you. So it doesn't necessarily hurt to apply early, but don't get nervous if you don't get the answer that you want right away, because it could be that they're sort of going through the pile, frankly. And then the second thing that I wanted to say in terms of applications, Angela also talked about, if you have that space to do, whether it's a diversity statement or whatever it is, if you had a bad semester in law school, in college, if you were working, and so it was, you didn't have the kind of time that other people did to devote to your studies. If you were sick at some point, right? Like whatever it is, if there is some reason that you can articulate for, your GPA being lower than you would like it to be, or your LSAT score being lower than you would like it to be, tell us that, right? Like those are not things to be embarrassed or ashamed of, right? Everybody hits potholes and obstacles and all these other sorts of things. And if you don't tell us about it, we can't take it into account. So on one hand, please don't feel like you have to share intimate details of your life, right? That's not necessarily any of our business, but to the extent that there are, ways that you can help us understand what your path to law school has been and why it has been difficult in particular ways, do that. It's a really, really useful thing when we're trying to sort through all, thousands of applications and figure out who you're going to admit. So I'll just leave it there.
Thank you so much, Dean Murchison. Go ahead, Cindy.
Dean Richardson goes. I am loving this, that while Dean Murchison is speaking, we have Dean Onwachi-Willig answering your questions. So I love this. So thank you.
In the chat?
Yes, in the chat. She's answering these questions, and I'm loving it. You're getting your questions answered by the dean of a top law school.
Casually.
That's all I'm saying.
Casually. It's kind of a big deal. No. Thank you for pausing for that, Cindy. And thank you, Dean Murchison. I am grateful that you addressed both the admissions piece, right? Concrete advice for students who are applying, and also the sustainability piece, because it's about making it through. Like anyone who's been in law school, right? There's a piece where you got to think strategically, how can I get in? And then there's how do I really do this thing? Full story. So thank you so much for that. And Dean Richardson, definitely, last but not least on this question, for how, some of the challenges in creating a more diverse law school student body, and then, some things that UCI Law is already doing to kind of overcome those challenges?
Wow. Well, I have very little to add. These, my fellow deans, Angela and Kimberly mentioned most of it. So I just want to highlight a few of the things that they said, just to highlight the importance of it, because I agree that one of the major challenges is cost, for sure. The second is US News. So let me stop at US News for a second, because I was watching some of Angela's answers and some of the questions. And someone said this, and I want to reiterate it. The ranking in US News is not related to the quality of the education that you will get. So, and the reason I say that is because I know, so this gets to the question of what are some of the challenges of creating a more diverse class? One of the challenges is students also choose the highest ranked school that they can get into. And that might be a mistake. So this is following up on Kimberly's point, because it's not just getting into that school. Is there an environment here for you to succeed? That is what you should be paying attention to. So get into the highest ranked schools that you can get into, all of the schools, safety school, whatever you want to call them. But if you can get a sense, then talk to students who are there, visit the school if you're able to do that, and see how you feel when you're done. And if you can visit the school when it's not admitted students weekend, everyone is on their best behavior, do that too. Because people will put on their best face, and then you realize what you saw is not actually what you get. When it comes to US News and World Report, I just have to say this, because I'm always saying this to students when I see them. It's up to you to create the groundswell, grassroots movement to get rid of US News. I'm here to help you. This is my ambition. I hate them, but I need you to find me. If you start paying attention to US News, we can diversify the legal profession and law schools even more quickly. So at UC Irvine, UCI, remember that name, come to my law school. Number one, we're the number one most diverse law school in the top 30. The number one most diverse law school in the top 30, and that is not diverse enough. And some of the problems there are the pipeline to law school. Many people want to apply. There's a study done in high school. Many of us want to apply to law schools. By college, we drop off. Apply to law schools, apply early. And then when you're doing those essays, what we are looking for, what the admissions committee is looking for, because we want you at our school. And we have the reality of US News, which we don't want to pay attention to, but we have to because you pay attention to it. And employers pay attention to it. So we want you to come, yes, apply, even if your GPA and your LSAT is below whatever the median is that's published. I saw that question too. Apply, go to the school that feels right for you. And then what we're looking for, even if you're not at the median, if you're below, what we are looking for is grit.
That's right.
So someone else raised this before. What we and the people on the admissions committee, what we want to be able to argue when we're arguing your case, because that's what we do, because we want you in our school. What we say is, and this gets back to what Angela said at the beginning about how strong we are because of the experiences we have had. And it's because of the experiences we have had that we might not have the same LSAT score and GPA that others have. But that is not a reflection of your ability to be a successful lawyer. It just isn't. So if in your application, you talk to us, and you don't have to share deep personal details, as someone said, but if you talk to us about how you have failed in some aspect of your life at some point, and then you have overcome that, you have worked your butt off, and then you have succeeded, that's what I'm looking for. That's what we're looking for. Because that is the quality that will make you successful. Every single one of us, I'm sure, on this webinar has failed. And frankly, if you have not failed, you are not trying hard enough. That's the way I hire people. I ask this question. Because if you've always been successful, I don't know what you're going to do when you're not. And law school's hard, and many people aren't successful when they begin. So what I'm looking for is, are you going to come here? Are you going to struggle, as we all do, as I did? And then are you going to pick yourself up, learn from your mistakes, and then do it again. And so when I'm looking at your file and when others on the admissions committee are looking at your file, this is one of the things I'm looking for. Do you have grit and resilience? And if so, it doesn't matter to me, right, about your LSAT score, because we know what all the problems with the LSAT scores are. It doesn't matter to me what your GPA is necessarily, right, because I want to see what was your major, did you work hard, all of those things are important. Really, what I want to look at too, though, is who are you? Do you have grit? Do you have resilience? Are you the type of a person that I think will make it through the struggle that is law school? So I just wanted to add to what my brilliant colleagues have already said. I agree with everything that they have said, and I just wanted to add those pieces.
Oh my gosh. I just want to talk about, because I feel like we can't have a conversation about diversity and about going to law school without having a conversation about social justice, right? It's all intertwined. So let me start with Dean Richardson, and I want to ask, what do you think the impact of diversifying the legal profession will be on the justice gap, and what do you hope to see in 10 or even 5 years from now that's different than what you see today?
I think that diversity in the legal profession is a prerequisite to addressing the justice gap. It just is. I mean, I was a civil rights lawyer my entire career before I became a law professor. And I considered doing immigration work and criminal defense work, which is what I was. I was a public defender for most of my life, civil rights work. And we understand in ways that others who haven't lived through this, what the justice gap, how the justice gap affects our lives, the lives of people we know, the lives of people we care about. And when you go to law school, people will often tell you it is all not about emotion. It is about reasonableness. It is about what the law says. Don't buy any of that when you get to law school.
Right.
And you're seeing some of that in the world right now. When we think about our current president, who won't step down, who won't concede, who won't, like, that is an embarrassment. This is just my own personal point of view. Not UCI, well, it is UCI's, whatever. Take that, it's not, this is my personal point of view for the recording. For the University of California. But when you see what's happening at the Supreme Court, when you see the complement of those judges, when you read what a justice like Sotomayor writes versus what another justice might write, like Scalia before he passed away, bringing our life experiences, bringing the way, it affects the way we view the world. We need people in the legal profession who view the world from our lens. Like all three of us talked about at the beginning, how Angela said, we have to overcome the presumption of incompetence every time we walk into a room. Angela said, or Kimberly said, we think people take this for granted until we realize when we talk to them that the things we experience, they've never experienced before. In talking to people in this day and age, in the post-George Floyd moment, where all of a sudden more people think, oh my gosh, race matters. What we have also seen is that there's a group of people who say things like, and I've had people say this to me, it is so hard for me to be in a room where we're talking about racial violence because it makes me feel so uncomfortable. It makes me feel like there's a spotlight on me. It makes me feel like people are going to judge me. And I say, I understand exactly what you're feeling, because this is how I have felt my entire life. So I'm glad that you're feeling this now, because let's get to the table to talk about it together. So yes, diversity will help us address the justice gap, because we will bring a perspective on what the law is, what it says, and what it could be that is sorely missing, because our legal profession is the least diverse profession, and yet law impacts everything. So come to law school. You will succeed. There are times you will feel like you want to drop out. There are times you will feel like you can't do it, but you can. If I could, if we could, you can. Because we need you.
I love it.
Great. Perfect.
Mhm.
And Dean Mutcherson, same question about the social justice issue. And thank you for your, it was amazing.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I 100% agree with everything, that Song said. I was also one of those sort of, self-righteous public interest students who was like, yeah, go ahead and make your money. I'm going to change the world. Right. But, all of those spaces are spaces where you need people who can walk into a room and say, why am I the only one who looks like me in this room? Right. And every time you see one of those commercials where it's something that's so patently offensive, and we all say, if only there had been a person of color in that room, right? Which is true, but it also has to be the case that you have to be willing, you have to be brave, right? I mean, there are times where you are the only person in the room. There are times when, I've had colleagues say to me, gosh, we wish you would talk about something other than race at some point. I can tell you who those colleagues are. Right. And so there's this real sort of pressure from a lot of folks that if you get your law degree, and particularly if you start doing work within these spaces that are these kind of staunch law spaces, you're supposed to fit in. You're not supposed to make people uncomfortable. You're supposed to do the things that everybody else has done before you. And my sort of response to that as a dean, and Angela taught me a very important lesson about, being brave as a dean. And that lesson is, if I lose this job, then I'm a tenured law professor. Woe is me, right? Like, that's just not a bad outcome. So if I want to be the person who's rattling the cage, if I want to be the person who's making people feel uncomfortable, if I want to be the person who says, we keep saying we care about diversity, and yet when we get the opportunity to hire somebody who doesn't look like everybody else in this room, we end up having some hour-long conversation about how they don't fit in, right? Which is basically just a way of saying they don't look like me, they don't talk like me, they don't want the world in the way that I do. So yeah, I think that it's incredibly important for us to be a part of these conversations. It requires us to be in the space, but it also requires us to be willing to step up, to be willing to talk. And sometimes what that means is you've got to find your people, right? It's the person down the hall, and you go into her office after lunch and say, let me tell you what just happened, right? You have to have that sort of support system, but you have to be willing to make people uncomfortable, or we're not going to get anywhere.
And last but not least, Dean Onwuachi-Willig.
Wow. Well, I have to say, I want to go to the church of Dean Richardson and Dean Mutcherson, because I'm
Me
just
too.
saying amen the whole time.
I think we are there. I think we are at that church.
There's not much to add. I mean, the only thing I would say is that, I every once in a while I think, boy, there's so much to change, and I can get overwhelmed. There's so much to change, and there's so much that has to be changed structurally, and there are only small changes being made at a time, and like, is that making a big enough difference? And I think it really is. And I would say the best example has been in watching the changes that have happened in legal academia in a short period of time, just because there have been a meaningful number of women of color law deans who I think we interact with each other, we rely on each other, we talk to each other, we collaborate with each other, and we conspire with each other to say, let's do this. How can we move the needle here? And that has had an impact in many ways. And we call our white allies to work with us too, right? And so, that has shown me that you can have meaningful change, even if it's not the full change that you need and you want, and every generation has done that. And one day we'll fully get there, but every little bit of pushing that sort of stone up that mountain we'll get it up there eventually. And so yes, absolutely, we need you.
Yes, so we're going to ask for more advice with this question. One piece of advice, if we could ask from each of our deans this evening to share with potential law students, maybe with especially those law students who maybe feel like they're missing some access to some secret manual that lives somewhere, or, like doesn't know a guy, or, what piece of advice would you give to a potential law student? Maybe Dean Mutcherson, can we start with you? Shall I go with another Dean?
No, it's okay. I mean, considering how often I call on a student who has no idea that it's coming, I think I don't get to be upset about it. I don't know. There are so many pieces of advice. I'm trying to think of the things that I tell my students at orientation. So a couple of things that I say to students, and if you come to Rutgers, you're going to hear this again, so act like you've never heard it before. One is that law school can be incredibly stressful and incredibly lonely. And one of the things that you need to do early on, and it's much harder in the world that we live in now because we're all so physically separated, but find your people, right? My people are what saved me in law school. I actually started a group my first year called the Women of Color Coalition with a couple other friends of mine. And that's how I got through law school, right? And so like find those people who are going to keep you sane, those people who are going to say to you, you belong here, those people who are going to be your study group, those people who you can commiserate with about the professors you love and the professors you hate and the students you love and the students you hate. Make sure that you have that, because that support system is going to be really, really critical. Second thing that I would say is your career as a lawyer starts the minute you walk into law school. It doesn't start when you graduate. It doesn't start when you take the bar. It starts the minute that you walk into law school. And don't believe anybody who says to you, nobody's going to remember what you were like as a law student. I can tell you stories about what people did in class our first year of law school that I will never forget. And I graduated a long time ago, right? So you have to walk into that experience thinking to yourself, I'm a professional now. I'm building a reputation here. I need people to respect me and think I'm a hard worker and, all of those things. So that's got to be a piece of what you bring into the space with you. And to the extent you feel like you don't know the rules of the game, that's another reason why you find your tribe, right? Like you find your people who can help you think about, oh, there's going to be this event at a law firm. What should we be wearing? Right. And those things sound really petty, but I was at a lunch with a group of lawyers, law firm partners. And one of them said, I had a guy come into an interview once, a law student come into an interview, and his shoes weren't polished. And I just said, that was it for me. Right? I mean, that's the kind of stuff that some of these people are going to be doing. So, you've got to kind of learn how to play the game a little bit. And then the last thing that I want to say is your professors, not all of them, but lots of your professors can be your allies. And one of the things that, and I know Song and Angela are going to agree with this, if you are a woman of color at a law school, you're going to spend a lot of time talking to the students of color, right? People are going to come to you, they're going to ask you questions, and we all do that work, right? Nobody says, get out of my office, you're wasting my time. Like we expect it and we want it because we want you to be successful. So if you need to get advice from somebody, I tell my students, if you need a pep talk, come on, I will say all sorts of wonderful things to you, even if I don't know you that well, right? So, use us as a resource. Never, ever struggle alone. Never, ever suffer in silence. There is somebody in that space who cares about you and who wants you to do well.
Thank you so much, Dean Richardson. Thank you. Dean Richardson, a piece of advice?
Yes, I agree with everything. So I'm glad you already said all of those things, Kimberly, so I'm not going to repeat them. But this advice is not any different from what I started with at the beginning. And so I'm just going to share it in the form of the story. And if you come to UCI, which I really, really hope you do, you will hear this. Okay, but it's really,
they
really
want to be 10 minutes from the beach. I don't know why they want to do that.
So skip it. No. But this is the story that I want you to remember. And I don't even know if it's true. Okay, so it's a story about a butterfly and a caterpillar. And the story is that there's a caterpillar in its chrysalis, and a man is walking by or a woman is walking by, and they see the caterpillar struggling in the chrysalis to get out. And so this man or woman walking by wants to help this caterpillar, doesn't want it to struggle, so cuts a hole in the chrysalis so that the newly emerged butterfly can fly away. And instead, what happens is that butterfly leaves the chrysalis and falls down to the ground and dies. And the reason I share this story with you is, if that person had left the butterfly there, butterflies need to struggle in its chrysalis to build up its muscles, to build up the muscles in its wings. So when it finally is strong enough to break through that cocoon, it is able to fly away. And that's what I want you to remember as you think about law school, as you think about life. You need to struggle to manifest. And you need to struggle to become that beautiful butterfly who will fly away and be successful. And too often we give up in that struggle and we think it's about us. We think we're not good enough. We think we don't belong here. And what I'm telling you is, those of us who struggle, who work through it to break through that cocoon, are the ones who succeed and can do anything. So that's the piece. I want you to remember that story whenever you struggle. You are just making yourself stronger to do the more amazing things that you will continue to do in your life. So that would be my piece of advice to you.
Thank you so much, Dean Richardson. I'm going to try not to cry as we
I love that story.
go into the next, no, Dean Onwuachi-Willig. Do you have a piece of advice?
Wow, that was a great piece of advice. I would say the advice I would give people would be to say, gosh, I should have been, it just, my mind went blank because I was so focused on that story. And what was I had something in my head. Is to not let things leave your head when you have them. I would say
it's too hard.
But I think it's just to really, I guess I would just say is to go for what you want.
Mm-hmm.
People, I always tell my students, you can't get a job you don't apply for, and you can't go to a school that you don't apply for. You can't get anything that you don't try for. And so you got to try it. If you want something, you've got to go for it. And you can't be scared about failing or not getting something. You just have to go for it.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody has letdowns, and you just have to, you'll learn from even those letdowns. So just go for it. Go for
Mm-hmm.
it. I know you're amazing. So, you should really go for it, and really, really, really take us up on it. I saw that somebody asked about being a law professor and doing a JD PhD program in philosophy, and happy to talk about it off list. You should email us. I put my email in there.
Nice.
And but we need more law faculty, and absolutely. There's so few. Somebody pointed out Professor Miradeo's book. There's so few faculty of color, so we really do.
And it's just so powerful, Dean Onwuachi-Willig, to see, when you look at who's teaching you, who's counseling you, who's leading you into becoming a lawyer, to see someone who looks like you is powerful. It can't be overstated. Thank you so much for your advice.
So I'm going to do super right now, shameless plug for LEAP. So let me see if I can do this. We are all over social media now, so please follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Legal Pipeline. We are now, I can't believe we have a YouTube channel. If you would have told me 6 months ago I would be doing YouTube, I'd be like, right. So we have a YouTube channel, and
On YouTube?
let's see, of course, I can't have this without saying, feel free, if you're feeling generous, to go to our website and make a little donation, because the more you donate, the more people that we can, we can reach. We also have a newsletter, so you can email me or go on our website and get on the newsletter. If you're on our newsletter list, I'm kind of putting together now a sidebar webinar list, because it looks like we have lots of people who keep coming back, which is great. Thank you so much. This was amazing. I'm just looking at the comments in here, and you have so inspired these students. And I think you've made them all feel so much more relaxed about applying to law school. Tiffany, don't you think so? Like,
absolutely. Like it just demystifies sort of like a lot of our internal talk, our fears. I mean, it's a lot of, I see the word inspire, just like every other message. It's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.